So today I'm going to show you 3 ways how you can successfully go from registered nurse to travel nurse. I'm Travel Nurse Rich. I've been a travel nurse for years, and let's get into the video. Going from registered nurse to travel nurse can be intimidating. Travel nursing is kind of a different world than staff nursing, and the info online can be confusing at best. And if you don't have a plan for how you're going to make this transition for the first time a success, then you need one. Because then you might end up disappointed with a bad experience instead of having an amazing experience that travel nursing should be. Because the freedom is second to none, you get to see some really amazing things and you get paid like way more. And make sure you stick around for the last tip because it is going to be the best tip in this entire video, even though the other ones are pretty great too. Tip number 1. Make sure your first contract that you take will pay you at least twice what you're currently making as a staff nurse. When you first become a travel nurse, they assign you an agent. Your agent will be your best friend in helping you get the contract that you want. They help you do this by getting your profile up to date, which they then send out to hospitals that you want to work at. It's almost like if you were talking with your friend and you were like, man, I would love to work at this hospital, that one, or this one if they paid me an insane amount of money. And then your friend was just like, okay, done. And you're like, what do you mean done? And they go, well, I just sent over your info to them because that's what you want to do, right? And we'll see if they call you back for an interview. I guess my point is that travel nurse agents really take the work out of finding a job for you. But let's get back to my original point here. When you first start going through that process of trying to figure out how much money you're going to make or how much money you need to make as a travel nurse, the easiest way to do this is start by taking your net pay that you currently make and multiply that by 2, which will give you your monthly take-home pay. Then you find out how much you're gonna be getting paid for travel nursing, which is going to be a weekly paycheck. So you'll have to multiply that one by 4 to get your take home for that. And as long as the amount that you're going to be getting paid as a travel nurse will be at least double what you were getting paid as a staff nurse, then you're good to go. And I know what you're thinking, but what if I find a contract that pays me like way more than double? Can I take that? I don't know why I just gave you that voice. That's probably nothing like what you sound like at all. But yeah, you can definitely take that contract too. Because at the moment, we're actually living in a time that's really high with crisis type contracts, which basically just means that hospitals are willing to pay insane amounts of money to have you work for them. So the odds of you finding a contract paying more than twice what you're currently making are very good right now. Just keep an eye on how many hours they want you to work per week, because sometimes they'll sneak in a 48-hour and you'll be like, wait a minute, I thought I was only working 36. Oh, and by the way, yeah, one of these days the market will probably correct itself and go back to paying travel nurses right about what we were making before COVID, which still ends up being good money, but you probably just won't see a ton of $10,000 a week contracts anymore. Oh, and here's a hidden bonus tip for number 1 that's gonna apply big time at the end of the video. Save some of the extra money you make as a travel nurse. A mistake that a lot of new travel nurses make is they end up spending a lot of that income that they just started making. But you'll see why when we get to the last tip. Step 2, look for contracts that only require you to work 36 hours per week minimum. The average contract for a travel nurse is a 36-hour a week contract. And the beauty about these contracts is you can always pick up more overtime if you want to work more than 36 hours a week, but you're never forced to. But with crisis contracts, they typically require someone to work more than 36 hours a week, whether that's 48 or 60 or even 72 hours a week. And when you're first a travel nurse, you want to avoid these high hourly requirements so that way you don't get burnt out before learning the ropes. And let me just say this, if you love working as a nurse and you just can't see yourself doing anything else and you've always been a workaholic, then sure, there's nothing wrong with working more than 36 hours a week and taking those high hourly requirement contracts. But that is usually for the more well-experienced and well-established nurse. But the reason that I recommend 36 hours a week for a contract is because it keeps you in control of how many hours you want to work. Because if you don't want to work 60 hours a week every single week, well then now you don't have to because your requirement is only 36 hours a week. One of the worst things about staff nursing is just how much control a hospital has over you as a staff nurse. If they want you to work mandatory overtime, then they're going to make you work mandatory overtime. If they want you to work mandatory on-call, then they're going to force you to take mandatory on-call. And if they want to freeze you 4 hours after your shift, there is very little that you can do to stop them from freezing you. We have all been there before, and we all know just how bad that sucks. But as a travel nurse, you only have to do what is in your contract. The only time that you have to work on call as a travel nurse is when you put that option in your contract. Or unless you're a cath lab nurse, I didn't forget about you guys. Look, my point is as a travel nurse, you cannot be penalized by how poorly a hospital is run or how poorly the next shift is staffed, but you can if you're a staff nurse. And now into number 3, and arguably the most important point that I'm going to share with you today. Tip number 3, if you need time off in between contracts to get your mind right, then you should definitely take it. Being a nurse is both a very rewarding and a very mentally stressful career at the same time. You end up working long hours trying to save lives, and half the time the people that you're trying to save are the ones that are fighting you the most, which is fine because we all knew that's what we were signing up for. But there was a survey of nurses that was done, and it showed that 34% of nurses were either burnout or dissatisfied with their job, and that number seems way too high. So if you start feeling burnout or dissatisfied, then you definitely need to take some time off to get your mental health in order. All right, so you remember in step 1 when I told you to save some money so that way it would come in handy later on in the video? Well, it's now later on in the video. The reason you're gonna wanna save some money is exactly because travel nurses really do not get vacation time. So as long as you put some money aside, then when you're ready to get away for a bit, you will be golden. But if you wanna find out how to consistently find those $10,000 a month contracts, then check out this video that I have right here. I'll show you where to go to see them for yourself. I'm Travel Nurse Rich. See ya.